Hi everyone! So today I wanted to do a book review. I really think that this is one of the best books to sort of be, kicking off the channel with because this is such an important book to me. It's a book that had a lot of influence on me in terms of my reading styles and introduced me to one of my favorite romance authors. So today I'm talking about Sherrilyn Kenyon's Dance with the Devil. It is an adult romance novel that I'm very, very fond of. I'm going to try to keep spoilers out of it. So really quickly, just to explain, if anyone's not familiar with Sherrilyn Kenyon's work, she writes this amazing series called the Dark Hunter series, and basically what she does is she takes pantheons from around the world, Greek, Roman, Atlantean. She actually takes some Native American gods and she sort of smushes them together, and while keeping still very true to a lot of the original tales, she sort of weaves it into her own world. So this was the first book of hers that I ever picked up. I got it for $2 at a used bookstore. I remember picking it up and I started reading it when I went to go pick my mother up. And I was waiting in the car for her and I was reading it. And she got in the car and I didn't notice. I was so into it, and I haven't put her books down since. So we're gonna start with talking about the characters. So the book follows Zarek, who is one of the Dark Hunters. He's been exiled to Alaska for 900 years because he messed up. And so he's stuck off there. Something else happens that I don't want to spoil. And he ends up at the very, before the book actually starts, something happens that I don't want to spoil. He ends up getting sent a justice nymph who is supposed to judge him and figure out if he needs to be killed or if he is a danger to humanity. The justice nymph that gets sent to him is Astrid. She is a sister of the Three Fates. The thing about Astrid is that she's never found anybody innocent in her entire time as a judge. But Archeron, who is sort of the leader of the Dark Hunters, believes that Zarek is innocent and knows that Astrid holds what he quotes a deep truth within her. That's sort of how the two meet. Basically, they end up getting trapped in a cabin with a snowstorm going on that Astrid controls, so Zarek can't leave the house. And that's how she intends to sort of push him to his limits to see if he snaps and hurts her, or if he, takes it and rolls with it, and then she can judge him guilty or innocent. Obviously, because it's a romance novel, you can see where Zarek and Astrid obviously get romantically involved. But sort of before I get to the romance, I want to talk about the two characters specifically. As Astrid is burnt out. She doesn't feel anymore, according to her. Yet now it was only through her books that brought her the emotions of others. Even though she couldn't really feel them, the unreal and muted emotions of characters comforted her on some level. And if she were capable of it, that would make her weep. So that's Astrid. She's been burned out by looking at the very worst of not only humanity, but gods and demigods, and she just has sort of given up. And she doesn't want to judge anymore. She wants to take a break. So when Archeron comes to her and says hey, I need you to judge this person, she's very reluctant to do it, but she holds a great affection for Archeron, so she says, yeah, sure, okay. So that's Astrid, and there's a lot more to her character, but I feel like, without, spoiling anything or getting into things that really are just best read through the book, I don't want to talk about it too much, so we're gonna move on. Zarek is a character I like to point to when people talk about sort of the brooding immortal, the stoic individual, and they're oh, it's been done to death. I always like to point to Zarek because he is, without a doubt, one of the best written characters that sort of falls into that cliche, so to speak, that I've ever seen. And personally, and this is something I'd want to talk about more in a different video, I'm still fine with that cliche as long as they're well written, because I think giving the characters depth beyond, being stoic and brooding, I think that's fine. I still get a kick out of it. That being said, we have a man who kind of described as being, quote, there were only so many kicks a dog could take before it turned vicious. He's been exiled to Alaska for 900 years. He was a Roman slave before that. has been sort of spat on by everybody, including people that are supposed to be on his team. And so for him, and he doesn't make it easy on others either. There's a large running theme of Archeron and others have tried to help him, at least to an extent, and he doesn't want to be helped. He thinks, he's beyond being helped. One of the things that runs through the book, one of the big themes, is The Little Prince. It's a book that both Astrid and Zarek love and quote, both alone and to each other. The very first chapter starts quoting that book, makes you sort of see like, okay, there's a little bit more depth to him. Not only for the fact that he was finally released in the book previous. He was released from Alaska to go to New Orleans, where he had to prove, he was good to be around people. And in order to do the right thing, and that's the thing, is I don't want to spoil anything that happens, but in order to do the right thing, he ended up knowing it would get him sent back and exiled back to Alaska. Not to mention getting further into the book, when he talks about Astrid, who he thinks is beautiful, and he is very much unsure of how he feels towards her because she treats him with not only respect but with kindness and warmth and calls him a guest in her home. This is how he describes her at one point in chapter 6. She was astounding and surprising. If he were someone else, he might even go back to the den where she sat with her wolf and make her laugh. But he didn't know how to make people laugh. He could recognize humor, most especially irony. But he wasn't the kind of man to make jokes or nurture smiles from other people, especially not a woman. That fact hadn't bothered him before. Tonight it did. So he very obviously has feelings beyond being, grumpy and dour. And this is something I think is always really important. It's not just feelings, because in romance novels, when you have the grumpy and dour, the stoic guy, you don't just want to see him being thoughtful and kind towards the woman. You want to see that he has redeemable qualities to other people. Because I think if he only treats the woman nicely, like the woman he's interested in, it doesn't say great things about his character. If there has to be some kind of morals behind there, and there actually are when it comes to Zarek, and they discuss it in the book. At one point in the book, they talk about a woman named Sherrilyn, who years previous Zarek had helped. She and her child broke down in their car on the way to a hospital, and he helped them, and they didn't have money to afford a house and stuff like that. So he pays for all their stuff, and in return, this woman, gives him someone to talk to when he goes into the town. She lets him, have a home-cooked meal every once in a while when he's there. He has compassion for these people, and that's what really gets me, is there's compassion not just for the woman that he's supposed to be romantically involved with in this book, but there's compassion for other people. And I feel like that's a really important thing to have in a book, even if it's a romance novel that focuses on the relationship between two characters. I guess from there, I want to move on to talking about the romance of the book. So, like I said before, it's a romance between Zarek and Astrid. I don't want to spoil too much. I don't want to get into anything too spoilery or anything that really is stuff you should read for yourself. I do want to say that Sherrilyn Kenyon's romance novels are some of the only ones I read, not just because of, say, the love triangle thing, which I talk about, I'll put a link to it, but also because I do not like it when romance novels have abusive relationships pretending to be perfectly okay. And that's my large issue with a lot of books. When it comes to romances, it's very, either somebody's abusive, and because it's not always about being physically abusive. You can be emotionally abusive. And I don't like that coming off as, oh, it's super romantic. I don't care if it's an adult novel and adults should know better. I think that it sends the wrong message, and there is a discussion to be had about free speech and a book's right to exist, and that's its own conversation. But I do think it's very important, to me at least, when I read books, I want to read romances that I feel are A-okay. And this one gets the A-okay check from me. So when it comes to romance in this book, it's cute, it's nice, it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. The romance in this book, I just think, is such a good example of how to do romance right. Sherrilyn Kenyon in general, I give tons of praise to for doing things like romance novels, right? But this especially, with Zarek and Astrid, and I also just have a fond place in my heart for this book, but I do feel like it is such an important and well-written story and romance that it just needs to be praised for that. This is a writing style I like. It's a basic third-person, well-written, you know, a nice amount of description versus a nice amount of, you know, action. There's not a lot to say about it other than I enjoy reading it and it keeps me gripped and enthralled the entire time. One of the other things I should quickly mention, there is sexual themes in the book. It's an adult romance novel, Sherrilyn Kenyon book. It's worth mentioning if that sort of thing kind of bugs you. I've read romance novels where sort of the sexual scenes don't contribute too much to the overall plot. Like, they help the plot and the romance move forward, but you could skip or skim those pages and you wouldn't be missing anything that's not sort of explained later. With this book, actually, you could probably skim, but you don't want to skip these scenes. Obviously, it's a little weird talking about, like, the sexual themes in a book, but without spoiling anything, it's actually important. There's actually, you know, there's plot to it. There's a reason that it is such a special thing that happens in the book. So it is something, if you're not comfortable with that, you do sort of miss out on part of the book if you're not comfortable with that kind of stuff. Even if you think, you know, you might not be comfortable, like, I say, like, give this book a try. Give Sherrilyn Kenyon's work a try, because it is phenomenal. The very last thing I wanted to talk about really quickly, and this video is getting really long, so I want to wrap it up. The very last thing I actually want to talk about with this book is, like many books, there's a couple lines in here that really stuck out to me, and I've vaguely mentioned this, I think, in, like, one of my first videos. Since I was 14, have been dealing with clinical depression, and it's kind of a weird thing to talk about. I'm not ashamed of it, I'm not, you know, afraid to talk about it. It's just kind of weird because I know it seems like it has nothing to do with this. But there's actually a couple lines in this book that are, you know, the kind of lines that, like, hit me right here and, like, made me feel and really, I felt like, related to what I'm going through, even though that's not what they're about. But so I just want to read them really quickly, because I feel like these are the kind of things, even if you don't read this book, I really just want to share these. So the first one: "What's the matter, Zarek? You afraid to die?" He snorted as he pushed Astrid towards Jess. "Dying's easy. It's living that's hard." Dying's easy. It's living that's hard. That's, you know, I really like that line. I think it's one that's always worth mentioning when you talk about this book. The other one is actually a conversation between Astrid and Zarek, and while they're talking about something different, when it comes to things like depression and anxiety, I feel like this is something that not enough people hear. So, you know what? If you haven't been told this today, I'm gonna read this conversation to you, and I'm saying it to you in the not romantic sense, but the way everybody should always hear this. "No," she said, smiling. "I'm not trying to take anything from you, Zarek. I'm only trying to give you a pleasant memory." "Why?" Astrid sighed at the look on his face. Kindness was so far beyond his comprehension that he couldn't even understand why she wanted to make him smile. "Because you deserve one." "For what? I haven't done anything." "You live, Zarek," she said, stressing the words, trying to make him understand. "For that alone, you deserve some happiness." You live. For that alone, you deserve some happiness. That goes for everybody. So yeah, if you like the review, let me know. If you've read the book, let me know. I'm really interested sort of to see, like I said, I'm not super familiar, like I'm very new to BookTube, obviously, and I'm very unsure, like, what kind of books people tend to talk about. I don't know if romance books are a thing that people talk about or read on here, but I really wanted to talk about this book because it's one of my favorite, and I think it's important to talk about. And I think sometimes things like romance novels sort of get overlooked when being considered, you know, good literature, and I think that's just a huge shame because there are wonderful books out there. So yeah, that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry it ran kind of long, but I have a lot of things to talk about. Alright, see you guys. I'm still not sure how to end videos, so the mask smells